On behalf of someone who asked me, can you take a look at Isaiah 13 in verse 16, the word ravished? They wanted to know what that meant. And then at the same time, if you have time to give an explanation about what Babylon means and maybe a brief summary of Isaiah 13.
Well, yeah, in Isaiah 13, before I read verse 16, we'll start in verse 1, which says, "The burden of Babylon, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see." So that means that the account following has to do with Babylon. But as we read the account, it says in verse 9, "Behold, the day of Jehovah cometh, cruel, both with wrath and fierce anger, to lay the land desolate, and he shall destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in his going forth, and the moon shall not cause her light to shine." And we recognize that language from Matthew 24:29, immediately after the tribulation, which, after the tribulation, relates to Judgment Day. Verse 9 here told us it's the day of Jehovah. And after telling us the stars are not giving their light and the sun is darkened, that also relates to Judgment Day. Then it says in verse 11, to finally nail it home with a very strong emphasis, "And I will punish the world for their evil and the wicked for their iniquity." So that very clearly telling us that what God is speaking of has to do with the final judgment of mankind, Judgment Day. But it's the burden of Babylon. And how can that be? Because Babylon represents the kingdom of Satan, and the kingdom of Satan consists of the nations of this world. It is all the unsaved people. And so God used Babylon and the king of Babylon historically to bring judgment on Judah that would typify the corporate church for 70 years. And that period of time represented the entirety of the Great Tribulation, which turned out to be 23 full years. And then after the church has been judged and God has used Babylon as an instrument of judgment in his hand to accomplish it, the Lord turns his attention to the king of Babylon, who's a type of Satan, and to Babylon, who's a picture of the world, and judges them. And we see this in many places in the Bible. And so after telling us that God will punish the world, it says in verse 15, "Everyone that is found shall be thrust through, and everyone that is joined unto them shall fall by the sword. Their children also shall be dashed to pieces before their eyes, and their houses shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children." And the Medes and the Persians are a figure of Christ, who is typified by Cyrus, ruling over the forces of the world, which would include the elect, the forces of this world, to come against Babylon to destroy it. And historically, the Medes and Persians did conquer Babylon in the year 539 BC. And all this language, that everyone is thrust through and they're dashed to pieces. Notice the language of having no pity on the fruit of the womb, and there's no salvation. We're forced to say by the Bible, that is, the Bible will not allow anything other than this to be said, no salvation even for babies. God shut the door of heaven on May 21, 2011, and only those saved prior to that time have entered into the kingdom of God and will enter in. No more entry granted for anyone else, yes, even children. And so we can see by the fierceness of the judgment on Babylon by the Medes and the Persians how it agrees with this judgment on the world at this time, and the finality of it as God has ended his salvation program. Now, as far as the houses spoiled, their wives ravished, this just goes along with what happens historically in battles in time of warfare. The conquering army takes the spoils, and they ravish the women. Actually, this is also in view in Zechariah 14, where in this case, this would be the picture in coming against Jerusalem is the picture of the judgment on the corporate church. And it says in Zechariah 14, verse 1, Behold, the day of Jehovah cometh, and thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished. And half of the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And the idea is that the defeated army, the defeated people, are completely subject to the desires, to the wants of the conquering army. They have nothing they can say. They have been totally defeated, and that's the picture that's in view. And it's all encompassing, of course, since God is judging the whole world, and the world is made up of men and women and children. We see in Isaiah 13, young men dashed to pieces, no pity on the fruit of the womb, the women ravished. It's all generations, it's all people, because they are typifying the whole unsaved human race that has come under the wrath of God.